Part 2. The Shadows of Reality. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The strange glitches and anomalies in his life were getting worse. His phone would now turn on in the middle of the night, broadcasting static. Every few hours, the same sequence of numbers minus 9,372,406 would flash on the screen, accompanied by the chilling sound of distant radio chatter. But no matter what he did, the messages never stopped. It felt like the world of Fallout 3 was leaking into his own reality. His friends dismissed his concerns. "You've been playing that game too much," they said, brushing it off as paranoia. But Mike knew better. It wasn't just the game. Something was wrong, and he needed to figure it out. One night, as Mike sat at his computer, sifting through forum posts and archived data, he received another anonymous email. This one contained a string of coordinates and a single sentence. The experiment never ended. His pulse quickened as he copied the coordinates and plugged them into a map. The location was in the middle of nowhere, an abandoned military installation out in the desert, long forgotten after the bombs fell. The place had no official name, just a number, Vault 64. Mike's mind raced. Vault 64. That vault didn't exist in the Fallout games. At least, not officially. Yet here it was, on a real-world map, connected to his encrypted messages. It felt impossible, but so did everything else that had been happening lately. Against his better judgment, he packed his bags and booked a flight. 2 days later, Mike was standing in the scorching heat of the Nevada desert, staring at a rusted sign that read, "Restricted Area, Keep-Out-UT." There was nothing around for miles, just sand, rocks, and the skeleton of an old military bunker in the distance. It looked like something straight out of Fallout, a decayed relic of the pre-war world. With a deep breath, Mike approached the entrance. The heavy steel door was slightly ajar, hanging loosely on its hinges. He squeezed through the gap, the air inside stale and suffocating. The bunker was dark, save for the occasional flicker of broken lights overhead. As he descended into the depths of the installation, the familiar feeling of dread crept over him. It felt just like a vault. The deeper he went, the more the bunker resembled the vaults from the Fallout series. Long, sterile hallways stretched out before him, lined with doors leading to abandoned living quarters. Everything was eerily intact, as if the place had been left untouched for decades. But there were no signs of life. No people, no skeletons. Just emptiness. Mike's footsteps echoed down the halls as he reached what looked like the command center of the facility. A massive control panel sat at the center of the room, covered in dust. He wiped away the grime and saw a large monitor, its screen cracked but still operational. Next to it, a terminal blinked weakly, awaiting input. Mike sat down at the terminal, his fingers trembling as he typed. The screen flickered, displaying a string of commands and a single prompt. Enter vault number. He hesitated for a moment before typing, 64. The terminal buzzed to life, displaying a series of logs. Most were corrupted, but one file was still intact. It was labeled Project Horizon, Vault 64. Mike clicked it open, and a series of documents appeared on the screen. Vault 64 Operational Summary. Project Horizon was initiated as a joint effort between Vault Tech and the Department of Defense to create a prototype simulation environment. The purpose of this experiment was to determine the long-term psychological effects of simulated reality on human subjects. Unlike traditional vaults, Vault 64 was equipped with advanced VR technology designed to immerse residents in a virtual world that mimicked post-nuclear life. The residents were unaware they were participating in a simulation. They believed they were living in a standard Vault Tech shelter, isolated from the outside world after the Great War. However, the simulated environment was modeled after an alternate version of the world outside, one where civilization had continued to thrive under the constant threat of nuclear war. Mike's heart pounded as he read the document. a virtual simulation. A vault designed to fool its inhabitants into believing they were living in the real world. It sounded absurd, but the more he read, the more it made sense. The next file was a series of audio logs recorded by the vault's overseer. Mike clicked on the first one, and a cold, mechanical voice filled the room. Log entry 001. Day 1. The simulation has begun. All residents have been successfully integrated into the VR environment. So far, there are no signs of distress. We will monitor their psychological responses to the simulated world and make adjustments as necessary. End log. Mike's hands shook as he clicked on the next log. Log entry 045. Day 365. The first signs of psychological deterioration have begun. Some residents have started to question the reality of their surroundings. We've introduced new variables to maintain immersion, but the longer they remain in the simulation, the more unstable their mental state becomes. End log. The logs grew increasingly disturbing as the days progressed. The residents of Vault 64 were slowly losing their grip on reality, their minds unable to cope with the constant strain of the simulation. Some had become violent, others withdrawn, but none had escaped the creeping madness that overtook the vault. Mike clicked on the final log, his heart pounding in his chest. Log entry 3650. Day 10 years. The simulation has failed. All subjects have succumbed to irreversible psychological damage. We are ceasing all monitoring efforts. Project Horizon is terminated. End log. Mike sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The vault had been abandoned, its inhabitants left to rot in a digital hell. But how did this connect to the number station? To the strange messages he'd been receiving? Suddenly, the terminal beeped, and a new message appeared on the screen. You found the truth, but the truth isn't finished with you. The room went dark. For a moment, Mike sat frozen in his chair, too terrified to move. Then, slowly, the sound of static filled the air. It was coming from the control panel, from the speakers hidden in the walls. And beneath the static, he heard it again. 9, 3, 7, 2, 4, 0, 6. The numbers echoed through the empty bunker, sending chills down Mike's spine. He stood up, his breath shallow, his mind racing. He had to leave. Whatever this place was, whatever had happened here, he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. But as he turned to leave, the static grew louder, filling the room with an almost physical presence. The lights flickered, and then, without warning, the monitor came back to life. A new message appeared, one that sent a wave of terror through Mike's entire being. Simulation reinitiating. The door behind him slammed shut, locking him inside the command center. Mike pounded on it, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The static grew louder, and the numbers played on repeat, drilling into his skull. 9, 3, 7, 2, 4, 0, 6. The world around him began to distort, the walls warping, the floor shifting beneath his feet. It was as if reality itself was unraveling, bending to some unseen force. Mike stumbled back to the terminal, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he tried to shut down the system. But the words on the screen were the only response he got. Welcome to the experiment.